story. The Christmas Eve delivery. Marcus Chen had been driving trucks for 18 years, and he'd volunteered for Christmas Eve routes for the last 12 of them. The pay was triple time, and his kids were grown now, scattered across the country with families of their own. Someone had to keep the supply chains moving while everyone else opened presents, and Marcus didn't mind being that someone. This year, he'd picked up a last-minute pharmaceutical delivery in Buffalo, New York, bound for a hospital in Portland, Maine. The manifest said critical medical supplies, insulin, antibiotics, blood products, time-sensitive cargo, life-or-death stuff. He left Buffalo at 4:47 p.m. on December 24, 2019. The weather forecast called for clear skies along I-90 and I-95, perfect conditions for the 7-hour drive. Marcus had his thermos of coffee, a bag of beef jerky, and a playlist of classic rock to keep him company. The truck's GPS showed an estimated arrival time of 11:52 p.m. He'd be unloading while most people were tucking kids into bed waiting for Santa. That was fine. That was the job. The first 3 hours went exactly as planned. Traffic was light. Most people were already where they needed to be for the holiday. Marcus made good time through Syracuse and past Utica, watching the odometer tick upward as the sun disappeared behind him. By 8:15 p.m., he was crossing into Massachusetts, making mental calculations about fuel stops. He had enough diesel to make it to Portland without refueling, but there was a truck stop outside Worcester where he liked to grab a quick bathroom break and stretch his legs. He pulled into the Flying J at 8:43 p.m. The parking lot was nearly empty, just 2 other semis sitting dark in the far corner. Inside, a tired clerk with a Santa hat sat behind the counter, scrolling through her phone. Marcus used the restroom, refilled his coffee, and bought a pack of gum. He was back on the road by 8:56 p.m., right on schedule. That's when things started feeling wrong. The GPS recalculated his route as he merged back onto I-90 East. Instead of showing 1 hour and 43 minutes remaining, it now displayed 3 hours and 18 minutes. Marcus frowned at the screen, tapping it with his finger. The route looked the same. Straight shot to I-95, then north into Maine. He checked his speedometer. 62 miles per hour, right where it should be. Maybe the GPS had glitched when he'd turned the engine off at the truck stop. He drove on, expecting the time estimate to correct itself. It didn't. After 15 minutes, he checked again. 3 hours and 19 minutes. The time remaining had increased even though he'd been driving toward his destination. That wasn't possible. Marcus grabbed his phone and pulled up Google Maps. Same thing. 3 hours and 17 minutes to Portland. The highway stretched ahead of him, perfectly straight and empty. No other vehicles in either direction. The streetlights cast orange, pools of illumination every 100 yards, creating a rhythmic pattern that drew his eyes forward. Marcus turned up the radio, but all he got was static across every station. He hit the scan button, and it cycled through the entire FM band without finding a single broadcast. On Christmas Eve, in the Boston metro area, that shouldn't happen. At 9:47 p.m., Marcus noticed something else. The mile markers. He'd been driving for 51 minutes since the truck stop, which meant he should have covered roughly 50 miles. But according to the mile markers, he'd only traveled 23 miles. He was certain he'd passed marker 87 just after Worcester. Now he was passing marker 110. That was only 23 miles and nearly an hour of driving at highway speed. Marcus felt the first flutter of real anxiety in his chest. He checked his speedometer again, 61 miles per hour. He looked at the road ahead, straight, empty. The same orange streetlights stretching into darkness. He tried the CB radio next, keying the mic and calling out on channel 19. "Breaker, breaker, this is northbound I-90, anybody out there?" Nothing but dead air. He tried channel 9, the emergency channel, same result. The exit signs started appearing. Exit 112 Auburn, exit 114 Charlton, exit 115 Sturbridge, normal spacing, normal numbering. But according to his GPS, he was still 3 hours and 6 minutes from Portland. He'd been driving for over an hour, and somehow he was further away than when he'd started. Marcus decided to take the next exit. Something was wrong with the highway, with the navigation, with something. He'd find a place to stop, maybe call the dispatch office, figure out what was happening. But when exit 115 approached, his hands wouldn't turn the wheel. He tried to move his arms, tried to steer toward the off-ramp, but his hands stayed locked on the wheel, keeping the truck perfectly centered in the right lane. He couldn't move them. Panic surged through him. Marcus pushed against his own hands, trying to force them to respond, but they might as well have been bolted to the steering wheel. His foot wouldn't lift off the accelerator either. He was locked in position, unable to control his own body, driving down an endless highway that led nowhere. At 10:23 p.m., he passed mile marker 142. The GPS now showed 4 hours and 37 minutes to Portland. He'd been driving for an hour and 36 minutes since Worcester, and his destination was getting further away with every mile. The highway remained completely empty. No other cars, no other trucks, no rest areas or gas stations, just the road, the street lights, and the mile markers clicking past in a steady rhythm. Marcus tried to scream, but his voice wouldn't work. His body wouldn't respond to any command except the ones needed to keep driving. His hands gripped the wheel at 10:02. His foot held steady on the accelerator. His eyes stared forward at the endless road. He was a prisoner, in his own body, and something else was driving the truck. The radio suddenly crackled to life. Not music or a DJ, but a voice, a child's voice, high-pitched and cheerful. "We've been waiting for you, Marcus. You always work on Christmas Eve. You always take the lonely routes. We've been watching you for so long." Marcus tried to respond, but his jaw wouldn't move. The voice continued. "You think you're so dedicated, so responsible, always delivering the important cargo, but you never ask what you're really delivering, do you? You never look closely at what's in the back of your truck." The temperature in the cab dropped. Marcus could see his breath forming clouds in front of his face. Ice crystals formed on the inside of the windshield, creating fractal patterns that spread across the glass. But the heater showed it was running at full blast. "You're carrying us, Marcus. All of us. The children who died waiting for Christmas. The ones who didn't make it to Christmas morning. We ride with drivers like you, the ones who work while everyone else celebrates. We need people like you to take us where we need to go." The mile markers were coming faster now. 156, 162, 171, 184. The truck was still moving at 61 miles per hour according to the speedometer, but the numbers were accelerating impossibly. The GPS display flickered and changed, showing a destination Marcus had never entered. Nowhere, Massachusetts. Arrival time. Never. At 11:15 p.m., Marcus felt the truck begin to slow. His foot was finally lifting off the accelerator, but not because he was controlling it. Something else was bringing the truck to a stop. The highway had changed. The streetlights were gone. The pavement beneath the wheels was cracked and broken, weeds pushing through ancient asphalt. The mile markers were rusted, the numbers illegible. The truck came to a complete stop. Marcus's hands released the steering wheel. He could move again. He grabbed the door handle and pulled, stumbling out onto the broken highway. The cold hit him like a physical blow, far colder than December in Massachusetts should be. When he looked back at his truck, he could see frost covering every surface, turning it into a sculpture of ice. He walked around to the cargo area, his boots crunching on frozen weeds. The rear doors were already open, swinging slowly in a wind he couldn't feel. Inside the trailer, the medical supplies were gone. Instead, the cargo space was filled with Christmas presents. Thousands of them, wrapped in paper that had faded and rotted, bows that had turned brittle and brown, presents that had never been opened, gifts that had never been delivered. Among the presents, Marcus saw them. Children. Translucent, flickering like old film footage. They sat among the ruined gifts, faces pressed against windows that didn't exist, waving at him with hands that cast no shadows. Some wore pajamas, some wore hospital gowns. All of them looked excited, as if Christmas morning had finally come. The child's voice spoke again, but now it came from everywhere. "Thank you for the delivery, Marcus. We've been waiting so long. Every Christmas Eve, we need someone to carry us. Someone who doesn't mind working while everyone else celebrates. Someone lonely enough to hear our call." Marcus ran. He didn't know which direction, didn't care. He just ran down the broken highway, away from the truck and the presents and the children who shouldn't exist. His phone was in his pocket, and when he pulled it out, the screen showed 11:47 p.m., almost midnight, almost Christmas. He ran until he saw lights ahead. Real lights, not the orange streetlights of the impossible highway. These were the red and blue flashing lights of a police cruiser. 2 Massachusetts state troopers stood beside their vehicle, parked on what Marcus could now see was a normal stretch of I-90. They looked at him with concern. "Sir, are you all right? We got a report of an abandoned semi about 2 miles back. Is that your truck?" Marcus turned around. Behind him, the highway looked completely normal. No broken pavement, no frost, no impossible darkness. Just a regular interstate at night with normal traffic flowing in both directions. His truck was visible in the distance, parked on the shoulder with its hazard lights flashing. I don't know what happened," Marcus said. "I stopped to check something and then—" The troopers exchanged glances. One of them spoke gently. "Sir, we need you to come with us. Your truck's been sitting there for 43 minutes with the engine running and the door open. We were getting worried." Marcus looked at his phone again. The date had changed. It was now 12:03 a.m., December 25th, Christmas morning. But according to his last clear memory, he'd only been stopped for a few minutes. He walked back to the truck with the officers, his mind struggling to process what had happened. The cargo area was sealed. The medical supplies were intact, exactly as they'd been loaded in Buffalo. The manifest showed no irregularities. Everything was normal, except Marcus's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the paperwork. He completed the delivery to Portland at 2:34 a.m., 3 hours behind schedule. The hospital staff accepted the cargo without comment. Marcus drove home in silence, taking back roads and avoiding highways. He requested a leave of absence the next day, and when he returned to work in January, he had a new rule. No more Christmas Eve deliveries, ever. But every December 24th at exactly 8:56 p.m., Marcus's phone shows a notification, a text message from an unknown number. It's always the same message. "Same time next year, the children are waiting." And attached to every message is a photo of his truck, parked on a broken highway that shouldn't exist, surrounded by presents that were never opened. Story 2. The Snowglobe House. Detective Sarah Morrison had worked Christmas details for the Seattle Police Department 7 years running. Domestic disturbances, drunk driving, the occasional burglary. Those were the typical calls that came in while most of the city celebrated with family. She didn't mind. Her divorce had been finalized in March. Her kids were with their father this year, and an empty apartment didn't appeal to her. At least working meant she was doing something useful. The call came in at 9:47 p.m. on December 24, 2021. A welfare check at 4432 Ravenna Boulevard, a residential neighborhood near the University District. The dispatcher's voice had an edge Sarah recognized after 16 years on the force. Something about the call was bothering them. "Neighbor called it in," the dispatcher explained. Says the house has been decorated for Christmas, but nobody's seen the family in 3 days. Mail's piling up, newspapers on the lawn. But here's the weird part. The Christmas lights are on every night, and she swears she can see people moving around inside through the windows. Sarah took down the details and headed over with her partner, Officer James Reeves. The address was in a quiet neighborhood of 1950s-era homes, the kind with big yards and mature trees. Number 4432 was a white 2-story colonial with green shutters, and it was indeed decorated extensively for Christmas. Lights outlined every window and door frame. Inflatable snowmen and reindeer crowded the front lawn. A large wreath hung on the front door. Everything looked cheerful and normal except for the newspapers. Sarah counted 11 of them, still in their plastic sleeves, scattered across the wet grass. The mailbox was overflowing, and the lawn hadn't been mowed in weeks, unusual for this neighborhood where homeowners associations enforced strict standards. "Let's knock," Sarah said, climbing the porch steps. She rang the doorbell and heard it chime inside. Through the frosted glass panels beside the door, she could see lights on in what looked like a living room. Christmas music was playing, faint but audible. "Jingle Bell Rock" by Bobby Helms. No one came to the door. Sarah rang again, then knocked loudly. "Seattle PD, welfare check." Still nothing. She tried the doorknob, locked. James was peering through the front window, his face pressed against the glass. "Sarah, you need to see this." She joined him at the window. Inside the living room was a Christmas wonderland. A massive tree dominated one corner, covered in ornaments and lights. Presents were stacked underneath, wrapped in bright paper. Stockings hung from the mantel. A fire burned in the fireplace, and sitting on the couch, perfectly still, were 4 people: a man, a woman, and 2 children. The man wore a red sweater. The woman had on a green dress. The kids, a boy and a girl, maybe 8 and 10 years old, wore matching pajamas with candy cane patterns. They were all looking toward the television, which appeared to be playing something. But none of them were moving, not even blinking. "They look like mannequins," James said quietly. Sarah felt cold despite her heavy jacket. Something was profoundly wrong with the scene. "We need to get inside. Let's check the back door." They walked around the house, noting that every window was decorated and lit. Through the kitchen window, Sarah could see a dining table set for dinner. Plates, silverware, wine glasses. A roasted turkey sitting in the center, still on its serving platter. Side dishes and bowls. Everything arranged as if for a holiday meal, but covered in what looked like a thick layer of dust. The back door was also locked. Sarah made the decision. "We're going in. Exigent circumstances. Something's clearly wrong here." James used his baton to break the small window beside the door, then reached through and unlocked it. The moment the door swung open, they were hit with the smell. Not decomposition, which Sarah had unfortunately smelled many times in her career. This was different. Sweet and chemical, like artificial pine scent mixed with something else she couldn't identify. It made her eyes water. "Jesus," James coughed, pulling his shirt up over his nose. "What is that?" They entered the kitchen, and Sarah immediately noticed the temperature. It was cold inside the house, far colder than outside. Her breath formed clouds. The turkey on the table was frozen solid, ice crystals covering the golden brown skin. The wine in the glasses had frozen and expanded, cracking the crystal. Sarah keyed her radio. "Dispatch, we're inside the residence, requesting additional units and probably medical. Something very wrong here." They moved through the kitchen into the living room where the family sat on the couch. Up close, Sarah could see they were real people, not mannequins. But they weren't moving at all. Their eyes were open, staring at the television, which was playing A Christmas Story on what looked like a DVD player. The man's hand was raised slightly, as if he'd been reaching for something. The woman's mouth was open in mid-sentence. The children's faces showed expressions of excitement frozen in place. "Are they?" James started to ask, but Sarah was already checking for a pulse on the man's wrist. His skin was cold, but not corpse cold. And there was something there, a pulse, incredibly slow. Maybe one beat every 15 seconds. "He's alive," Sarah said, shocked. "Check the others." James confirmed the same for the woman and children. All alive, all with impossibly slow heartbeats and respiration rates so low they were almost undetectable. It was as if they'd been paused, frozen in time, but not dead. Sarah noticed something else. In the center of the coffee table, surrounded by coasters and magazines, sat a snow globe. It was large, maybe 10 inches tall, and incredibly detailed. Inside the glass sphere was a perfect miniature replica of this exact house. White colonial green shutters, Christmas decorations, and all. Tiny figures stood in the front yard. Family of 4. As Sarah leaned closer to examine it, she realized the figures weren't just any family. They looked exactly like the people sitting on the couch. Same red sweater on the father, same green dress on the mother, same candy cane pajamas on the children. The detail was extraordinary, down to the facial features and hair color. "James, look at this." He came over and they both stared at the snow globe. The scene inside showed the family standing in the front yard, looking up at their house. But as Sarah watched, one of the tiny figures moved. Just slightly. The father figure's head turned as if looking toward where the real family sat frozen on the couch. "Did that just—" James didn't finish the sentence. Sarah reached out to pick up the snow globe, but the moment her fingers touched the glass, everything changed. The room lurched sickeningly, and suddenly she wasn't looking at the snow globe anymore. She was inside it. She stood in the front yard of 4432 Ravenna Boulevard, but everything was wrong. The sky above was a perfect dome of glass with tiny white flakes perpetually falling but never landing. The house looked exactly right, but when Sarah turned to look at the street, there was nothing there. Just white void, as if reality ended at the property line. James was beside her, looking equally horrified. "What the hell just happened?" The front door of the house opened and the family walked out. The same family that had been frozen on the couch, but now they were moving, smiling, looking completely normal. The father waved cheerfully. "Welcome," he called out. "We've been waiting for someone to join us. It gets lonely in here, just the 4 of us, especially at Christmas." Sarah's hand went to her service weapon, but it wasn't there. Neither was her radio, her phone, any of her equipment. She was wearing her uniform, but all her gear had vanished. James was the same, just his uniform, nothing else. "What is this?" Sarah demanded. "What's happening?" The mother smiled, but her eyes were wrong, too wide, too unblinking. "We're in the snow globe, detective. We've been here since December 21st. We were admiring our Christmas decorations, and my husband picked up the snow globe we'd gotten as a gift from his office party. The moment he touched it, we all ended up here, inside it." The children were playing in the yard, throwing handfuls of the perpetual snow at each other, giggling. But their laughter sounded flat, like a recording played at slightly the wrong speed. "That's impossible," James said. "You can't be inside a snow globe, that's not—" "We thought the same thing," the father interrupted. "But here we are, and now so are you. The snow globe needs witnesses, people to see it, to acknowledge it exists. When we got trapped inside, our real bodies froze in place. We're conscious here, but out there we're statues, decorations, part of the Christmas scene." Sarah's mind raced, trying to process this. "How do we get out?" The mother's smile widened. "You don't. Not until someone else touches the snow globe and takes your place. That's the rule. Someone has to be inside to watch the house, to keep the Christmas magic alive. When you touched it, you freed us." Now it's your turn." The family began walking toward the edge of the property, toward the white void. Sarah ran after them, but the moment they crossed the property line, they vanished. Just disappeared like they'd never been there. When Sarah tried to follow, she hit an invisible barrier, the glass dome. She was trapped inside. She and James spent what felt like hours trying to find a way out. They tried breaking windows, kicking down doors, anything to escape the miniature house. But every exit led nowhere. Open the front door and there was just white void. Smash a window and the glass reformed instantly. They were prisoners in a perfect replica of reality, trapped inside a Christmas decoration. The worst part was the time, or rather the lack of it. The clock in the house, visible through the window, remained frozen at 9:52 p.m. The snow fell endlessly but never accumulated. Nothing changed. Nothing moved except Sarah and James. They didn't get hungry or thirsty. They didn't get tired. They just existed, suspended in an eternal moment. Sarah didn't know how long they'd been trapped when she noticed movement outside the glass dome, distorted by the curved surface, but definitely movement. Someone in the real house walking around, more police responding to the welfare check, her backup. She screamed and pounded on the invisible barrier, but no sound escaped. She watched as officers moved through the house, saw them discover the frozen family on the couch, saw them carefully photograph everything, including the snow globe on the coffee table. Saw one officer lean down to examine it closely. "Please," Sarah whispered, "pick it up, touch it, let us out." But the officer didn't. He took photos, made notes, and moved on. The crime scene technicians came and went. Nobody touched the snow globe. They carefully bagged it as evidence, placing it inside a plastic container without making direct contact with the glass. Through the curved surface of her prison, Sarah watched her own frozen body on the couch right where she'd been standing when she touched the snow globe. Beside her, James's body stood motionless. 2 more statues added to the Christmas tableau. The real family, the Hendersons, she learned from listening to the investigators, was transported to Harborview Medical Center. The doctors couldn't explain their condition. Comatose but with active brain function, heartbeats so slow they could barely be measured, body temperatures near freezing but alive. It was as if they'd been paused, the doctor said, placed in suspended animation by unknown means. The snow globe was transported to the evidence facility at police headquarters. Sarah and James went with it, trapped inside their glass prison. They could see out, distorted and curved, but they could see the fluorescent lights of the evidence room, the metal shelves, the other items in storage, but nobody could see them. Nobody knew they were inside. Days passed, or what felt like days. Time was meaningless inside the snow globe, but Sarah could track the passage of the outside world through the evidence room's windows. Day turned to night, turned to day. Christmas came and went. The new year arrived. The real Henderson family remained in their comas. Sarah's department listed her and James as missing, possibly kidnapped. The snow globe sat on a shelf, tagged and documented, waiting for someone to explain its connection to the mysterious case. Waiting for someone to touch it. Sarah spent her existence watching the evidence room, screaming silently for help, praying someone would pick up the snow globe. But evidence custodians were careful. They wore gloves. They handled everything with proper procedure. Nobody made direct skin contact with the glass. Until February 14th, when a new evidence clerk named Michael started his shift. He was cataloging items for a court case, and he picked up the snow globe to read its tag. He wasn't wearing gloves. He touched the glass with his bare fingers. Sarah felt the lurch, the sickening transition, and suddenly she was on the floor of the evidence room, gasping for breath. James was beside her, equally disoriented. Michael stood frozen where they'd been, his eyes wide with shock, one hand still outstretched toward the shelf. Inside the snow globe, Sarah could see him now. A figure in an evidence room uniform standing in a miniature replica of the storage facility trapped behind glass. He was screaming, but no sound came out. Sarah grabbed the snow globe. Every instinct told her to smash it, to destroy it and free Michael. But James stopped her. If you break it, does that kill everyone inside or trap them forever? Sarah didn't know. She couldn't risk it. They took the snow globe and Michael's frozen body to the department psychologist, then to specialists at the University of Washington. Nobody could explain it. Nobody could help. The snow globe was locked in a maximum security facility, handled only with tools, never touched directly by human hands. Michael remained trapped inside, a permanent resident of his own miniature evidence room. The Hendersons eventually woke from their comas in March with no memory of their time inside the snow globe. They claimed they'd simply been admiring their Christmas decorations when everything went dark, then woke up in the hospital months later. Sarah returned to work, but she couldn't stop thinking about Michael still trapped inside the glass. She'd freed herself by condemning him. She'd escaped her prison by creating his. Every night she dreamed of him in the snow globe, pounding on invisible walls, screaming in silence. The snow globe is still in storage, locked in a vault, at an undisclosed location. The department classified the entire incident, citing concerns about public panic and copycats. Officially, Michael transferred to another department. The Hendersons moved away, wanting to forget their Christmas nightmare. But Sarah knows the truth, and every Christmas Eve she thinks about that snow globe, about Michael trapped inside a perfect replica of a room that doesn't really exist, about the fact that the only way to free him is to condemn someone else. She's never touched another snow globe since. She never will. But she wonders in her darkest moments how many other snow globes are out there. How many have people trapped inside them, living in frozen moments, waiting for someone to touch the glass and trade places? How many Christmas decorations on how many mantles contain entire worlds, entire lives, suspended in glass spheres filled with perpetual snow? She doesn't celebrate Christmas anymore. Can't bring herself to do it, because every decoration is now a potential prison and every ornament might contain someone like Michael, screaming silently for help that will never come. Story 3: The Shopping Mall Santa. Trevor Whitmore had been playing Santa Claus at the Westfield Valley Mall in Sacramento for 11 years. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid well during the holiday season, and Trevor genuinely enjoyed it. He liked making kids smile, hearing their Christmas wishes, seeing the magic in their eyes when they sat on his lap and whispered secrets about what they hoped to find under the tree. At 56 years old, with his naturally white beard and genuine belly laugh, Trevor was what mall management called authentically Santa-like. The 2018 Christmas season was his 12th year at Westfield, and it started normally enough. He arrived on November 23rd for the first day of Santa photos, settling into the elaborate North Pole display the mall had constructed in the center court. Fake snow, candy cane columns, a throne-like chair for Santa, and 2 nervous teenage elves hired to manage the line and help with the younger children who got scared. For the first 3 weeks, everything was routine. Hundreds of kids, thousands of wishes, the usual requests, video games, dolls, bikes, puppies. Trevor listened to each one, ho-ho-hoed appropriately, promised to do his best, and smiled for the photos. It was exhausting but rewarding work. The strange requests started on December 14th. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, climbed onto Trevor's lap. She had dark hair and pigtails and wore a red velvet dress. She looked up at him with serious eyes and whispered, "I want you to bring my sister back." Trevor smiled gently. "Is your sister away somewhere? Did she move to a different city?" The girl shook her head. She died last Christmas. She got sick and the doctors couldn't help. I want her back. I know Santa can do magic, so I want you to bring her back." Trevor's heart broke. He'd had requests like this before. Children who didn't understand death's finality, who thought Santa's magic could fix anything. He handled it the way he'd been trained, gently explaining that Santa could bring toys and games, but some things were beyond even his powers. The girl nodded sadly and left with her mother. But that night, Trevor couldn't stop thinking about her. The look in her eyes. The absolute certainty that Santa could bring her sister back if he just wanted to badly enough. When Trevor got home to his apartment, he found himself looking up the girl's story. It wasn't hard. Sacramento wasn't a huge city and there had been news coverage. Emily Thornton, age 8, had died of leukemia on December 27, 2017. Her younger sister Jessica was the girl who'd sat on his lap. Trevor felt deeply sad for the family, but he pushed it aside. Part of the job was hearing heartbreaking stories. He couldn't fix every problem in the world. The next child who made a strange request was a boy, maybe 9 years old. He climbed onto Trevor's lap and immediately said, "I want my dad to wake up." "Is he sleeping?" Trevor asked, playing along. "He's been sleeping for 6 months. Car accident. The doctors say he might not wake up. But you're Santa. You can wake him up." Trevor handled it as gently as he could, but the boy left crying. Trevor tried to move on to the next child, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about these requests. Not just sad. Everyone dealt with sadness during the holidays, but specific, targeted, as if these children were being sent to him deliberately. Over the next 3 days, 5 more children made similar requests. Not for toys or games, but for impossible things. Bring back a dead grandmother. Cure a mother's cancer. Stop parents from getting divorced. Prevent a house foreclosure. Each request was delivered with absolute conviction that Santa Claus could fix it if he chose to. Trevor mentioned it to the mall manager on December 18th. "I'm getting a lot of heavy requests this year. Kids asking for things I can't possibly deliver. It's getting to me." The manager shrugged. "It's the holidays. People are stressed. Kids pick up on that. Just do your best and stick to the script." But that night, Trevor had the first dream. He was in the Santa display at the mall, but it was nighttime and the mall was closed. The lights were off except for the glow from the North Pole set. And there were children. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, standing in silent lines that stretched back into the darkness of the closed mall. All of them waiting to see Santa. All of them with the same serious, expectant expressions. In the dream, Trevor tried to speak, but no sound came out. He tried to stand up from the throne, but he couldn't move. And one by one, the children approached. Each one climbed onto his lap. Each one whispered an impossible request. "Bring back the dead. Cure the dying. Fix the broken. Make everything right again." And with each request, Trevor felt something draining out of him. Not blood or breath, but something else. Some essential part of himself being pulled away, consumed by the endless needs of children who believed he could save them. He woke up gasping, tangled in his sheets, heart pounding. It was 3:47 a.m. His apartment was freezing, though the thermostat showed the heater running at full blast. When Trevor went to the bathroom for water, he caught sight of himself in the mirror and stopped. His reflection showed Santa Claus, not Trevor in a Santa costume, but actual Santa Claus. The fake beard he wore at work was now real, growing from his face. The red suit wasn't a costume anymore. It was his skin, red and fuzzy like felt. His eyes were no longer his own brown, but bright blue, twinkling with an unnatural light. Trevor screamed and stumbled backward. When he looked in the mirror again, he saw himself. Regular Trevor, no costume, no beard. Just his own face, pale and terrified. But for that brief moment, he'd seen something else, something wearing his body like a costume. He called in sick the next day, and the day after that. But on December 21st, the mall manager called personally. "Trevor, I need you here. We're getting complaints. Parents are saying their kids are asking specifically for you. They saw you on Facebook photos and now they won't sit with the replacement Santa. You need to come back." "I can't," Trevor said. "Something's wrong. I don't think I should. You're under contract through Christmas Eve. If you don't show up, we'll have to take legal action. I'm sorry, but the mall has commitments to fulfill." Trevor went back on December 22nd, dreading every moment. The line was longer than he'd ever seen it. The mall was packed with last-minute shoppers, but the North Pole display had a line that stretched to the food court. And every child in that line, every single one, was silent. No fidgeting, no excitement, no nervousness. They just stood there waiting with patient, ancient eyes. Trevor sat in the throne and forced himself to smile. The first child approached, a girl he didn't recognize. She climbed onto his lap and whispered, "Give me what I deserve." Before Trevor could respond, the camera flashed. The girl climbed down and walked away without another word. The next child came, a boy. "Give me what I deserve." Flash. Next child. "Give me what I deserve." Flash. Over and over, dozens of children all saying the same thing. Trevor tried to break away, tried to stand up and leave, but he found he couldn't move. His body was locked in place on the throne, forced to smile, forced to listen, forced to nod and promise and ho ho ho, while child after child climbed onto his lap and made their demand. The teenage elves didn't seem to notice anything wrong. They managed the line mechanically, faces blank, moving like puppets on strings. The parents in line stared forward with empty eyes, not really seeing their children, not really seeing anything. By 8 p.m., when the mall finally closed, Trevor had seen 347 children. Every single one had said the same phrase, "Give me what I deserve." When the last child left and the mall security announced closing time, Trevor found he could move again. He stumbled out of the throne, his legs weak, his whole body trembling. He drove home in a daze, barely aware of the road. When he got to his apartment, he found gifts waiting, hundreds of them. Stacked in his living room, covering every surface, piled so high they touched the ceiling. All wrapped in identical red and green paper, all with tags that read "From Santa." Trevor didn't remember unwrapping them, but he must have, because suddenly he was surrounded by opened boxes. And inside each box was a photograph. Pictures of children. Not happy holiday photos, but surveillance images, kids at school, kids in their bedrooms, kids playing in parks, kids sleeping, hundreds of children all being watched. On the back of each photo was a list of sins, little things mostly. Lied to teacher about homework, pushed brother down, stole candy from store, said mean things about classmate, normal childhood misbehavior documented in obsessive detail. And at the bottom of each list was a verdict written in red ink, "Naughty." Trevor's phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. "You know what naughty children deserve. You're Santa Claus. It's your job to deliver appropriate punishments. We've been very patient, waiting for you to understand your role. But Christmas is almost here. Time to finish your work." Trevor threw his phone across the room. He grabbed the photos, tried to tear them up, but they wouldn't rip. The paper was somehow indestructible. He tried to burn them, but they wouldn't catch fire. He couldn't destroy them, couldn't get rid of them. The next morning, December 23rd, the news reported multiple child abductions across Sacramento. 7 children, all taken from their homes during the night. No signs of forced entry. Parents found sleeping unnaturally deeply, unable to wake until morning, and in each child's bedroom a gift had been left behind. Red and green wrapping paper, a tag reading "From Santa." Inside each gift was coal, real coal, black and dusty, smelling of sulfur. Trevor knew with absolute certainty that he'd delivered those gifts. He had no memory of it, but he knew. While he'd been sleeping, or thought he'd been sleeping, something wearing his body had made Christmas deliveries, had taken children who'd been declared naughty by whatever force was working through him. He went to the police, tried to explain, but they thought he was having a mental breakdown. They were kind but firm. He needed to go to a hospital, get evaluated, not worry about children's urban legends. Trevor went back to the mall on December 24th, Christmas Eve, his last contracted day as Santa. The line was shorter now. Many parents had heard about the abductions and were keeping their kids home. But there were still children waiting, still demands to be made, still the same ancient eyes staring at him from young faces. At 2:47 p.m., a child climbed onto his lap, not asking for anything, just sitting there. And Trevor felt something snap inside him. The presence that had been growing in his mind, the thing that had been wearing him like a costume, suddenly surged to full control. Trevor, the real Trevor, was pushed down deep into his own consciousness. He could see and hear, but he couldn't control anything. He was a passenger in his own body while something else operated the controls. The thing wearing Trevor smiled with his mouth and spoke with his voice, but the words weren't his. "What would you like for Christmas, child?" The little boy on his lap whispered, "I want my dad to stop drinking. And if he doesn't stop, what should happen to him?" The boy looked confused. I don't know. Think carefully. Bad people deserve bad things. Doesn't your father deserve to be punished for hurting your family?" The boy started to cry. The thing wearing Trevor laughed. Not Santa's jolly ho-ho-ho, but something cruel and cold. Security intervened, pulling the boy away, asking Trevor what was wrong with him. Trevor, the real Trevor, screamed inside his own head, trying to regain control. With enormous effort, he managed to force one word out through his lips. "Help." But it sounded like ho, as in ho-ho-ho. And everyone thought he was just staying in character. The rest of Christmas Eve was a nightmare. Trevor trapped in his own body, unable to stop the thing that was using him. It made more children cry. It told them things about their families that it shouldn't know. It whispered suggestions about how to punish the people who'd wronged them. It corrupted the idea of Santa Claus, turning it into something dark and twisted. Mall security finally removed Trevor from the North Pole display at 6:18 p.m., 3 hours before his shift was supposed to end. They banned him from the property, threatened legal action, told him his contract was voided. The teenage elves quit on the spot, traumatized by what they'd witnessed. Trevor drove home, still only partially in control of his own body. When he got to his apartment, the gifts were gone. The photos were gone. Everything was clean and normal, as if none of it had happened. But Trevor knew better. He could feel the presence still inside him, dormant but not gone, waiting for next Christmas. He locked himself in his bedroom and waited for midnight, waited for Christmas Day, hoping that would end whatever curse had attached itself to him. At 12:01 a.m., Trevor felt the presence withdraw. It slithered out of his mind like something physical, leaving behind a residue of cold malevolence. His body was his own again. He collapsed on the floor, sobbing with relief. But the relief was short-lived, because on Christmas morning the news reported that all 7 of the abducted children had been found. Returned to their homes during the night, unharmed physically but changed psychologically. Each child spoke in flat, emotionless voices about the lessons they'd learned, about naughty and nice, about punishment and reward, about the real Santa Claus who knew everything they'd ever done wrong and would come back next year to check on their behavior. The children's eyes, parents reported, had changed. They were brighter, bluer. They twinkled with an unnatural light, especially when they talked about being good for Santa. Trevor never worked as a mall Santa again. He grew out his beard but dyed it black to avoid any resemblance to Santa Claus. He moved to Portland, changed his name, tried to start over. But every Christmas season he feels it, the presence hovering just outside his mind, waiting for an invitation back inside. And sometimes late at night he gets text messages from unknown numbers. Photos of children, lists of naughty behaviors, suggestions for appropriate punishments. The thing that used him hasn't given up. It still thinks Trevor is Santa Claus. It still wants him to deliver what naughty children deserve. Trevor never answers the messages, never responds, but he knows with terrible certainty that one Christmas he'll be weak enough to let it back in. One holiday season he'll open that door again. And next time the presents won't leave. Next time it will take permanent residence, and Trevor Whitmore will disappear entirely, replaced by something ancient and cruel wearing a Santa Claus costume. He doesn't sleep well in December. He avoids children, avoids anything red and green, avoids Christmas carols and holiday decorations. Because every reminder of Christmas is also a reminder of what's waiting for him. What wants to use him as a vessel for its twisted version of holiday justice. The real Trevor is still in there somewhere, but every year there's a little less of him and a little more of something else. Something that knows if you've been bad or good. Something that's making a list and checking it twice. Something that's coming to town whether you're ready or not. And it's not bringing presents. Story 4. The Carolers. Bethany Price loved Christmas music. She'd sung in her church choir for 22 years, and every December she looked forward to the annual caroling nights when their group would walk through the neighborhoods of Duluth, Minnesota, bringing holiday cheer to their community. There was something magical about singing in the snow, seeing porch lights come on, watching families gather at windows to listen. It was the purest expression of Christmas spirit Bethany knew. On December 23, 2020, Bethany organized what would become her last caroling event. COVID-19 restrictions had eased somewhat, and with masks and social distancing, the church decided they could safely carol outdoors. 12 members of the choir met at the church at 6:30 p.m., bundled against the bitter cold. Temperature was 18 degrees Fahrenheit, but the wind chill made it feel closer to zero. They divided into 3 groups of 4, each taking a different route through the residential areas near the church. Bethany's group consisted of herself, Thomas Reed, the choir's bass, Jennifer Liu, alto, and Pastor Mark Davidson, who'd been leading the church's Christmas services for 15 years. They had song sheets, battery-powered candles, and thermoses of hot chocolate for between stops. Their route took them down Maple Street, a quiet neighborhood of older homes with yards that backed up to a stretch of undeveloped forest preserve. They'd caroled this route for years, knew most of the families who lived there. First stop was the Henderson house, where they sang Silent Night while the elderly couple waved from their living room window. Second stop was the Patel family, who came out onto their porch despite the cold to listen to Joy to the World. Everything was wonderfully normal. The third stop was 8 on 47 Maple Street, a house Bethany didn't recognize. That was odd. She'd walked this street dozens of times over the years, thought she knew every home. But there it was, a Victorian-style house painted deep blue with white trim. Christmas lights outlining every window and gable. It looked charming, welcoming. Exactly the kind of house that should be part of their caroling route. "I don't remember that house," Jennifer said quietly as they approached. "Wasn't there just an empty lot here last year?" Bethany frowned, trying to recall. Jennifer was right. There had been an empty lot. The neighborhood association had been debating what to do with it for years. But now this house stood there, looking like it had been there forever. well-established landscaping, mature trees in the yard. Even the sidewalk leading to the front door was old cracked concrete rather than new construction. Maybe it was just finished recently, Thomas suggested, built to look vintage. They walked up to the house. The Christmas lights were beautiful, thousands of white lights creating intricate patterns. Through the windows, they could see a Christmas tree, tasteful decorations, all the hallmarks of a family that loved the holidays. The front door was decorated with a wreath made of real evergreen boughs. Bethany knocked on the door, their standard practice to let residents know they were about to sing. Usually people heard them coming and opened doors or windows before they knocked. But this house was silent despite the lights being on. After a moment, the door swung open. A woman stood in the doorway, maybe 40 years old, wearing a green sweater that looked like it had come from a 1950s catalog. Her hair was styled in an old-fashioned wave. Her smile was bright and welcoming. "Carolers!" she exclaimed. "How wonderful! We've been hoping someone would come by. Please, please sing for us. My family would love to hear some Christmas music." She stepped back inside, leaving the door open. Bethany could see into the house, a living room that looked like a museum display of mid-century American Christmas. Aluminum tree with a color wheel light rotating beside it. Bubble lights in the windows, decorations that must have been antiques perfectly preserved. A man appeared behind the woman wearing a cardigan and bow tie. Two children, a boy and a girl in clothing from another era, stood beside them. The entire family looked like they'd stepped out of a Norman Rockwell painting. "What shall we sing?" Pastor Mark asked Bethany quietly. "Let's do Hark the Herald Angels Sing," Bethany decided. It was a classic, always well received. They began to sing, their voices blending in four-part harmony perfected through years of practice. The family stood in the doorway, smiling, swaying gently to the music. Everything seemed perfect, exactly what caroling was supposed to be. But as they reached the second verse, Bethany noticed something strange. The family's lips were moving in perfect synchronization with the carol, singing along. But no sound was coming from them. Or rather, the sound was coming from somewhere else, from inside the house. From multiple voices, far more than 4 people, all singing the same words at the same time. Bethany kept singing, but her attention was now divided. She was looking past the family into the living room, and she could see shadows moving. Lots of shadows. Dozens of people-shaped silhouettes swaying and shifting behind the family that stood in the doorway. The carol ended. Bethany and her group smiled and nodded, preparing to move on to the next house. But the woman in the doorway spoke up quickly. "Oh, please don't go yet, that was beautiful. Would you sing another? We so rarely get visitors. Please, just one more song?" There was something desperate in her voice, something that made Bethany want to politely decline and leave. But Pastor Mark, always kind, always wanting to spread Christmas cheer, nodded agreement. "Of course, one more. Oh, come all ye faithful," perhaps. They began the second carol, and this time Bethany watched the family carefully. Their mouths moved perfectly with the English lyrics, but the sound coming from inside the house was different. The words were wrong. Not English, not any language Bethany recognized. It sounded ancient, guttural, full of harsh consonants that hurt her throat just to hear. The shadows inside the house were more active now, pressing closer to the doorway. Bethany could see them more clearly. Human shapes, yes, but wrong somehow. Proportions slightly off. Movements too fluid, too boneless. And there were so many of them. The living room seemed packed with shadow people, all swaying, all singing in that terrible not language. Jennifer noticed it too. She fumbled her lyrics, her voice faltering. Thomas's bass notes became uncertain. Only Pastor Mark continued singing confidently, apparently not noticing anything amiss. When the carol ended, the woman's smile had changed. It was wider now, stretching her face in a way that should have been impossible. "One more. Please, we need one more." "We really should move along," Bethany said firmly. "Other houses are waiting. Please." The man spoke now, his voice flat and hollow. "We've been waiting so long, we need 3 songs. 3 songs to open the door fully. You've sung 2, just one more, please." The children's eyes had gone completely black. Not dark, not shadowed, but utterly black. Voids where eyes should be. "We're leaving," Bethany said, stepping backward. She grabbed Jennifer's arm and Thomas moved with them. But Pastor Mark remained in place, staring at the family with a strange, glazed expression. "Mark, come on," Bethany urged. "They need one more song," Pastor Mark said dreamily. "It's Christmas. We should give them what they need." He opened his mouth and began to sing "Silent Night Alone." His voice was beautiful, clear and perfect, but it wasn't quite his voice anymore. It had harmonics that shouldn't exist in a human throat, overtones that made Bethany's ears ache. The family in the doorway began to move forward, not walking but gliding, their feet not quite touching the ground. The shadows behind them poured out of the house like liquid darkness, spilling onto the front lawn, spreading toward the caroling group. "Mark, stop singing," Bethany shouted, but he didn't respond. He was locked in the carol, unable to stop, giving the family what they'd asked for. The 3rd song. The final key that would open whatever door they needed opened. Jennifer screamed. One of the shadows had reached her, wrapping around her legs like fog. Where it touched her skin, her pants frosted over instantly. Thomas tried to pull her away, but the shadow held firm and more shadows were flowing toward them. Bethany did the only thing she could think of. She started singing too, but a different song. "Jingle Bells." Loud and off-key, deliberately disrupting Pastor Mark's carol. Thomas understood immediately and joined her, his bass voice overpowering Mark's tenor. The effect was immediate. The shadows recoiled, the family in the doorway jerked backward, and Pastor Mark gasped as if surfacing from deep water. The spell, whatever it had been, broke. "Run," Bethany commanded, and they ran. Behind them, they could hear the family screaming. Not words, just raw sounds of rage and frustration. The shadows pursued them down Maple Street, flowing across lawns and sidewalks like a dark tide. But as the caroling group reached the streetlight at the corner, the shadows stopped. They couldn't cross into the lit area, couldn't follow beyond the boundary of the house's property. The 4 of them stood under the streetlight, gasping for breath, watching the shadows writhe at the edge of darkness. The blue Victorian house was now dark, all its Christmas lights extinguished. It looked abandoned, derelict, as if it had been empty for decades. "What the hell was that?" Jennifer demanded, her voice shaking. Pastor Mark looked confused. I don't remember. We were singing and then... Did something happen?" Bethany pulled out her phone and called 911, explaining that something very wrong had occurred at 847 Maple Street. While they waited for police to arrive, she kept watching the house. The shadows had withdrawn, but she could still see movement in the windows. Shapes that might have been human or might have been something else watching them from the darkness. The police arrived 12 minutes later. Bethany explained what had happened, though she knew how crazy it sounded. The officers were professional but skeptical. They went to investigate the house while the caroling group waited by the police cars. The officers returned 15 minutes later, looking puzzled. "Ma'am, that house is abandoned. Has been for at least 20 years according to county records. The address is 847 Maple Street, but there's been an ongoing legal battle about the property. Something about disputed ownership dating back to the 1940s. Nobody's lived there since the original family died." "That's impossible," Bethany said. "We saw people, a family. The lights were on." The power's been disconnected for decades, we checked. There's no electricity running to that building. And nobody's been inside recently. The dust on everything is inches thick. The police took statements, but Bethany could tell they thought the group had experienced some sort of shared hallucination. Carbon monoxide exposure maybe, or pranks from neighborhood kids with projectors. They promised to investigate further, but clearly didn't consider it a high priority. The caroling group went back to the church, too shaken to continue their route. They sat in the fellowship hall, drinking hot chocolate that had long since gone cold, trying to process what they'd experienced. Pastor Mark was the most disturbed. "I remember now," he said quietly. "When I was singing that third song, I could see them. Not the family in the doorway. What was behind them? Inside the house. There were hundreds of them, Bethany, hundreds of shadow people, all singing along, all waiting to be let out. And I was opening the door for them. If you hadn't stopped me, if I'd finished Silent Night, they would have come through. All of them." "Who were they?" Thomas asked. "I don't know. But they've been trapped in that house for a very long time. Since the 1940s, maybe. The original family, the real family that lived there, they did something. Performed some kind of ritual during Christmas, something that went wrong. They trapped themselves and others. Lots of others. All of them waiting for someone to sing 3 complete Christmas carols at their door. 3 songs to break the seal." Over the following days, Bethany researched the history of 847 Maple Street. She found newspaper articles from December 1947. A family named the Hutchinsons had lived there, parents and 2 children. On December 23, 1947, they'd hosted a Christmas party. Witnesses reported hearing singing from the house, beautiful choral music that lasted for hours. But when guests arrived for the party the next day, they found the house empty. The family had vanished. Police investigation found evidence of occult practices, strange symbols drawn on the floors, burn marks from candles arranged in specific patterns. The house had remained abandoned since then, with various attempted owners reporting strange occurrences. Voices singing in the night, shadows that moved independently, feelings of overwhelming dread. Nobody had been able to live there for more than a few weeks before fleeing. And every December 23rd, neighbors reported seeing lights in the windows, seeing shapes moving inside, hearing Christmas carols sung by voices that shouldn't exist. Bethany's caroling group never sang on Maple Street again. They changed their route, carefully avoiding that entire block. But every December 23rd, Bethany drives past 847 Maple Street just to check. And every year the house is dark and empty, except for 2021. On December 23, 2021, Bethany drove past and saw the house lit up again, Christmas lights outlining every window. The same blue Victorian, the same inviting appearance. And standing on the front lawn, she saw carolers. Not her group, different people, a group of 4 young adults with song sheets and flashlights. Bethany pulled over and ran toward them, shouting warnings. But she was too late. She heard their voices, beautiful 4-part harmony singing, "O Holy Night." The second verse. They were already on the second song. The front door of the house stood open. The family in vintage clothing stood in the doorway, smiling their 2 wide smiles. Behind them, the shadows writhed and waited. Bethany screamed at the carolers to stop, to run, but they couldn't hear her. They were locked into their performance, giving the family what they'd asked for. She reached them just as they began the third song, Silent Night, and she grabbed the nearest singer's arm, trying to physically pull them away. The singer turned to look at her, and Bethany saw that their eyes were glazed, distant, hypnotized. They kept singing, and so did the others, all 4 of them completing the fatal third carol while Bethany desperately tried to break their concentration. When Silent Night ended, the shadows erupted from the house, not just flowing, exploding outward in a tidal wave of darkness that engulfed the four carolers instantly. Bethany ran and the shadows chased her to her car. She could hear screaming behind her, but she didn't look back. She drove away with shadows writhing in her rearview mirror, coating the street, spreading through the neighborhood like an oil slick of living darkness. By the time police arrived at 847 Maple Street, the shadows had withdrawn back into the house. The four carolers were found standing on the front lawn, alive but changed. Their eyes were black voids. Their skin was pale and cold to the touch. They wouldn't or couldn't speak. They just stood there, swaying slightly as if listening to music nobody else could hear. They were taken to St. Mary's Hospital, where doctors couldn't find anything physically wrong with them. No injuries, no signs of trauma. But they wouldn't respond to any stimuli. They just stood or sat wherever they were placed, swaying slightly, lips occasionally moving as if singing silent songs. They're still there, in a special ward. 4 young adults who went Christmas caroling and came back as something else. Something hollow. As if the shadows had taken everything that made them human and left only empty shells that looked like people. Bethany moved away from Duluth in March 2022. She couldn't stay in a city with that house, with those shadows, with the knowledge of what Christmas caroling had become in that one terrible location. She doesn't sing anymore, can't bring herself to do it. Because every time she opens her mouth, she remembers the feeling of trying to stop those 4 carolers. Remembers the desperation as the 3rd song completed. Remembers the shadows pouring out of 847 Maple Street. The house is still there, still abandoned according to official records. But on December 23rd, every year it lights up. The Christmas lights come on, powered by nothing connected to any electrical grid. The vintage family appears in the doorway, smiling their impossible smiles. And the shadows wait inside, hundreds of them, all singing Christmas carols in languages that predate human speech. They're waiting for carolers, always waiting. 3 songs is all they need, 3 complete Christmas carols sung at their door, and the seal breaks and the shadows can spread a little further into the world. Bethany warns everyone she can. She's posted about it online, contacted paranormal investigators, tried to get the house demolished. But it never works. The house is protected somehow, maintained by forces nobody understands, and every year someone new discovers it. Someone thinks it's charming, thinks it's the perfect place to spread Christmas cheer with a few songs. And the shadows get what they're waiting for. If you ever go caroling in Duluth, Minnesota, avoid Maple Street. If you see a blue Victorian house with white trim and thousands of Christmas lights, don't approach it. If a family in vintage clothing invites you to sing for them, run. Because the 3rd song is the key. The 3rd song opens the door. And what comes through that door has been waiting since 1947 to finish a Christmas celebration that went horribly, impossibly wrong. The Hutchinson family is still in there somewhere, still hosting their eternal party, still collecting guests who will never leave. And the house is very patient. It has all the time in the world to find carolers who will sing 3 songs and let the shadows out. Story 5. The Christmas Letter. Graham Foster had been a postal worker for the United States Postal Service for 23 years, and he took pride in his work. Rain, snow, heat, gloom of night. The unofficial motto was more than just words to Graham. He was dedicated to ensuring every piece of mail reached its destination, especially during the Christmas season when people relied on cards and packages to connect with distant loved ones. December 2022 was Graham's 24th Christmas season delivering mail in the suburban neighborhoods of Portland, Oregon. His route covered approximately 600 residential addresses, and during the holidays, that meant thousands of Christmas cards, letters, and packages. Graham knew his route intimately. He knew which dogs were friendly and which to avoid, which residents tipped at Christmas and which complained about every little thing, which mailboxes stuck and which swung open smoothly. On December 17, 2022, Graham noticed something unusual in his morning mail sorting. Among the hundreds of standard Christmas cards with their festive stamps and return addresses, there was one letter that stood out. The envelope was old, not just aged, but genuinely antique. Yellowed paper, brittle at the edges. The address was handwritten in fountain pen ink that had faded to brown. But what caught Graham's attention was the date on the postmark. December 17, 1952. Exactly 70 years ago, the letter was addressed to Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield, 2847 Spruce Lane, Portland, Oregon. That address was on Graham's route. He'd delivered there thousands of times over the years. Currently, the house was occupied by a young family, the Johnsons, who'd moved in 3 years ago. Before that, an elderly man named Harold something or other. Graham couldn't recall anyone named Whitfield. He examined the letter more closely. It had clearly been in the postal system for a very long time. The envelope bore marks and stamps from multiple processing facilities. Routing codes from postal systems that had been updated or discontinued decades ago. Somehow, this letter had been lost in the system for 70 years and had just now made its way back into active circulation. Graham's supervisor noticed him staring at the letter. Something wrong? Look at this postmark, 1952. This thing's been lost for 70 years. The supervisor shrugged. Happens sometimes. Old mail rooms get renovated, someone finds a bag of letters that fell behind a sorting machine in 1960. Just deliver it to the current resident. They can do what they want with it. Graham added the letter to his delivery bag, but he couldn't stop thinking about it. 70 years. The person who'd sent it was almost certainly dead. The intended recipient was definitely dead or would be impossibly old. This letter represented a connection between people who probably didn't exist anymore, a message that had taken 7 decades to arrive. He reached 2847 Spruce Lane at 1:34 p.m. The house was a modest 2-story craftsman-style home painted gray with white trim. Christmas decorations covered the front porch, inflatable snowmen, strings of colored lights, a wreath on the door. Graham could see the family's minivan in the driveway and children's toys scattered in the front yard. He approached the mailbox, sorted through the day's delivery for this address, several Christmas cards, some catalogs, a few bills, and added the mysterious 1952 letter to the stack. He was just about to place everything in the mailbox when the front door opened. Mrs. Johnson, Graham thought her first name was Rachel, came out onto the porch, bundled in a heavy coat. "Hi, Graham. Anything good today?" "Just the usual holiday cards," Graham said. Then, because he couldn't help himself, he pulled out the old letter. Though there is this one unusual piece. It's addressed to an Eleanor Whitfield. "Do you know if she lived here before?" Rachel Johnson came down the porch steps and took the letter carefully, her eyes widening as she examined it. 1952? Oh my God. Eleanor Whitfield was the original owner of this house. We found some old documents about the property history when we bought it. She built this place in 1948 with her husband, but I don't know what happened to her. "Well, it's your mail now, I suppose," Graham said. "Addressed to this house even if the person's gone." Rachel nodded slowly, still staring at the envelope. "Should I open it? It feels wrong somehow, like reading someone else's diary." "Legally, it's been delivered to the address on the envelope. You can do what you want with it, but..." Graham hesitated. "If you do open it, I'd be curious to know what it says. 70 years is a long time for a letter to be in transit." "I'll let you know," Rachel promised. Graham continued his route, but the letter nagged at his mind for the rest of the day. Who had sent it? Why had it taken 70 years to arrive? What message could be so important that the universe had conspired to deliver it 7 decades late? He got his answer the next morning. Rachel Johnson was waiting at her mailbox when Graham arrived at 2847 Spruce Lane. "Graham, I need to show you something. I opened the letter yesterday evening and I think something's very wrong. I think you need to see this." She handed him the letter. Not the envelope, but the actual letter itself, carefully unfolded. The paper was fragile, threatening to crumble at the slightest rough handling. The handwriting was the same fountain pen script as the address, elegant but rushed, as if written in desperation. Graham read, "My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, then the worst has happened, and I won't be coming home for Christmas as I promised. I'm writing this from the hospital, though the doctors don't know I'm writing. They think I'm sedated. They don't understand what's happening to me. You were right to worry about my work at the Dempsey Laboratory. I should have listened when you said the experiments were dangerous. But I was so certain we were on the verge of something revolutionary. Time displacement, Eleanor. We were learning to move objects through time, sending them forward and backward by years, even decades. The accident happened 3 days ago, December 14th. I was adjusting the temporal field generator when something went wrong. The field collapsed inward instead of projecting outward, and I was caught in the center of it. The displacement effect hit me directly. I'm dying, Eleanor. The doctors can see the symptoms but can't understand the cause. My cells are aging at different rates. Parts of me are 70 years old while other parts are still young. My heart is failing because half of it belongs to 1952 and half to some future decade. I can feel myself coming apart across time. But that's not the worst part. The displacement field didn't just affect me. It created a kind of anchor, a fixed point in space and time centered on our home. I don't fully understand the mathematics, but according to Dr. Reeves, our house at 2847 Spruce Lane has become temporally unstable. You need to leave, Eleanor. Don't wait for me to come home. I won't be coming home. Leave the house before Christmas, before December 25th, 1952, because that's when the full effect will manifest. The temporal anchor will activate, and everything within the house will become displaced. Scattered across time like I am. I'm mailing this letter now, marking it urgent. You should receive it within a day or two. Please, please leave the house. Go stay with your sister in Seattle. Don't be there on Christmas morning. I love you. I'm so sorry for what I've done. The house isn't safe anymore. It will never be safe again. Your loving husband, James." Graham finished reading and looked up at Rachel, whose face was pale. This is some kind of historical curiosity, right? A letter from someone involved in secret government experiments or something? That's what I thought at first, Rachel said. But then I looked up the name. James Whitfield. I found newspaper articles from December 1952. He died on December 16, 1952 at Good Samaritan Hospital. The official cause of death was listed as sudden organ failure of unknown origin, and his wife, Eleanor Whitfield, disappeared on December 25, 1952. Christmas morning. She was never found. Graham felt a chill that had nothing to do with the December cold. She disappeared from this house? According to the police reports, yes. Neighbors said they saw lights on Christmas morning, heard Christmas music playing. But when they came over to check on Eleanor, she'd been alone since her husband died. The house was empty. Not just empty of people, empty of everything. All the furniture was gone, all the decorations, all the personal belongings, like the house had been completely cleaned out overnight. That doesn't make sense, Graham said. Even if she moved, how could she remove everything in one night? And why would she disappear without telling anyone? She didn't move. The next residents who bought the house in 1953 found it completely furnished. Victorian-era furniture, decorations from the 1890s, clothing from the turn of the century. Nothing from the 1950s. like the house had somehow replaced Eleanor's belongings with items from 60 years earlier. Graham stared at the house behind Rachel. It looked completely normal in the morning light. Just another Portland home decorated for Christmas. But according to this letter, if it was real, the house was temporally unstable, displaced across time, dangerous. "Have you experienced anything unusual since you moved in?" Graham asked. Rachel bit her lip. I wasn't going to mention it because it sounds crazy, but yes, small things. We'll put something down, keys, a phone, whatever, and find it in a completely different room hours later. Sometimes we find objects that don't belong to us. Old toys, vintage dishes, books with inscriptions from people we don't know. And sometimes what? Sometimes we see them. People. Just for a second, like shadows passing through the rooms, wearing old-fashioned clothing. We thought we were imagining it, or that the house was just settling in strange ways that created optical illusions. But after reading this letter, I think we've been seeing the previous residents. All of them. Scattered across time. Graham felt his professional demeanor cracking. This was beyond his experience, beyond his understanding. You need to contact someone. Historical society, paranormal investigators. Someone who can make sense of this. Or we need to leave, Rachel said quietly. The letter says Eleanor should have left before December 25th. We're 8 days away from Christmas. What if the same thing happens to us? What if on Christmas morning we disappear like Eleanor did? Over the next week, Graham couldn't stop thinking about 2847 Spruce Lane and the Johnsons. He did research during his breaks, looking up information about the Dempsey laboratory that James Whitfield had mentioned in his letter. He found references to a private research facility that had operated in Portland from 1947 to 1953, officially studying advanced physics. The facility had been shut down abruptly in January 1953 following what official records called a catastrophic equipment failure. 3 researchers had died. The facility's records were classified, sealed by the government. Graham also found more information about the house at 2847 Spruce Lane. The property had an unusually high turnover rate. Residents rarely stayed more than 3 years. Some had left citing bad feelings or strange occurrences. One family in the 1970s had reported their children talking to the other families who lived in the walls. Another resident in the 1990s had claimed to see furniture that wasn't theirs appearing and disappearing. But nobody had disappeared since Eleanor Whitfield in 1952. Maybe whatever effect James had warned about had been a one-time event. Maybe the temporal instability had faded over the decades. Or maybe everyone since Eleanor had simply been lucky enough to leave before Christmas morning. On December 23rd, Graham's supervisor called him into the office. "We got a strange request from one of your route addresses, 2847 Spruce Lane. The residents, the Johnsons, they're asking if they can return a piece of mail." "Return it? To who?" "That's the weird part. They want to return that old letter you delivered last week, the one from 1952. They said they want it sent back to the original sender, James Whitfield, even though he's been dead for 70 years. Graham felt his stomach tighten. "Did they say why?" "Mrs. Johnson said something about it being wrong for them to have read it. Said the letter contained personal information that was meant for Eleanor Whitfield only, and keeping it felt like a violation of privacy. She wants it returned to sender. The sender is dead. There's no return address that would be valid. I know that, you know that, but she insisted, said we should try anyway. She was pretty upset about it, actually, almost frantic." Graham agreed to stop by 2847 Spruce Lane and talk to Rachel Johnson. When he arrived that afternoon, he found the house dark, despite it being only 4:30 p.m. No Christmas lights were on, The decorations that had covered the porch were gone. The house looked abandoned. Graham knocked on the door. No answer. He rang the doorbell. Nothing. He was about to leave when he noticed the front door was slightly ajar, not fully latched. He pushed it open carefully. "Mrs. Johnson? Rachel? It's Graham from the post office." The interior of the house was freezing, colder than outside despite the winter chill. And it was wrong. The furniture was different. Not the modern IKEA pieces and family-friendly decorations the Johnsons had. This was Victorian furniture. Heavy dark wood, ornate carvings, upholstery in deep burgundy and forest green. Christmas decorations from another era hung from the walls. An old-fashioned tree stood in the corner, decorated with glass ornaments and real candles. Graham's breath formed clouds in the frigid air. "Hello? Is anyone home?" A woman appeared at the top of the stairs. She wore a long dress, dark blue with a high collar, her hair pinned up in a style from the early 1900s. She looked at Graham with eyes that held no recognition, no awareness of the present day. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice sounding far away like an old recording. "I'm looking for the Johnsons, the family that lives here." The woman tilted her head, confused. "I don't know anyone by that name. This is the Whitfield residence. I'm Eleanor Whitfield. Did you have business with my husband?" Graham's blood turned to ice. Eleanor Whitfield. The woman who disappeared in 1952, 70 years ago. She was standing in front of him, looking exactly as she must have looked before receiving the letter that warned her to leave. "What's today's date?" Graham asked, his voice shaking. "December 23rd, 1952. 2 days before Christmas. I'm waiting for my husband to come home from the hospital, though I fear..." She trailed off, her expression becoming distressed. Graham backed toward the door. This was impossible. Completely impossible. But he was looking at Eleanor Whitfield in her house in 1952. Or at least he was looking at an echo of her, a moment trapped in time replaying in this temporally displaced house. He turned and ran outside. The moment he crossed the threshold, everything snapped back to normal. The house exterior looked modern again. The Christmas decorations were back on the porch. Through the window, he could see contemporary furniture, the Johnsons' belongings. Rachel Johnson opened the door, looking exhausted and frightened. "You felt it too, didn't you? The house is getting worse, more unstable. We see different time periods overlapping now. Yesterday, I walked into my kitchen and found it looked like something from the 1970s. Avocado green appliances, rotary phone on the wall. Then I blinked and it was normal again." "You need to leave," Graham said urgently. "Today. Right now. Don't wait until Christmas. We're packing. We called a hotel. We're going to stay there through the holidays. But Graham, the letter. We need to send it back. I know it sounds insane, but I think that's the key. The letter was never supposed to arrive. It got lost in the postal system for 70 years, and delivering it now broke something. Created a temporal paradox. James Whitfield sent it to warn Eleanor, but it arrived 70 years too late. We need to send it back, need to close the loop somehow." She handed Graham the letter, carefully placed back in its original envelope. "Please, take it back to wherever it came from. Return it to sender, even though that's impossible. Maybe if the letter goes away, the displacement will stop." Graham took the letter, not knowing what else to do. He returned to the post office and showed it to his supervisor, explaining the situation as rationally as he could while leaving out the impossible parts about seeing Eleanor Whitfield and the house changing time periods. His supervisor examined the letter and made a decision. "We'll mark it, return to sender, addressee deceased, and send it to our dead letter office. That's where mail goes when it can't be delivered and can't be returned. Maybe that's where it belongs." Graham packaged the letter carefully and sent it to the Dead Letter Office, a facility in Atlanta where undeliverable mail was processed and eventually destroyed. He felt like he was sealing away something dangerous, something that shouldn't exist. On December 24th, Christmas Eve, Graham drove past 2847 Spruce Lane on his way home from work. The house was dark. The Johnsons' minivan was gone from the driveway. They'd left as planned. The house sat empty, waiting for Christmas morning. Graham couldn't sleep that night. At 11:47 p.m., he gave up trying and drove back to Spruce Lane. He parked across the street from 2847 and waited, watching the house as midnight approached. At exactly 12:00 a.m. Christmas morning, the house changed. The lights came on, every window blazing with warm yellow light. Through the windows, Graham could see people, dozens of them, multiple families, multiple time periods, all existing simultaneously. Victorian-era figures in the living room, 1920s flappers in the dining room, 1950s parents with children around a Christmas tree, modern furniture overlapping with antiques, Christmas decorations from every decade scattered throughout the visible rooms. And standing in the front yard, looking up at the house, was Eleanor Whitfield in her dark blue dress. Beside her, translucent and flickering, was a man who must have been James. They were holding hands, both of them crying, both of them staring at the house that had become their prison. As Graham watched, more figures appeared in the yard, all the residents who'd ever lived at 2847 Spruce Lane appearing like ghosts, drawn to the house on Christmas morning. The temporal anchor James Whitfield had accidentally created had trapped them all, not killing them but displacing them, scattering them across time, binding them to the house forever. The figures began to fade as sunrise approached. By 6:47 a.m. they were gone, and the house looked normal again. Empty and dark, just another vacant Portland home. The Johnsons never moved back. They broke their lease and relocated to Seattle, taking the financial loss rather than returning to 2847 Spruce Lane. The house remained empty for 8 months before new residents moved in, a retired couple who didn't believe in ghosts or temporal displacement. They lasted until the following Christmas morning, December 25, 2023, when they reportedly saw previous residents walking through their home. They moved out on December 26th. Graham still delivers mail to 2847 Spruce Lane to whoever the current residents are. The house has someone new every year now. Nobody stays past their first Christmas, and sometimes when Graham places mail in the mailbox, he sees letters that shouldn't exist, envelopes with postmarks from decades past or decades in the future. Letters addressed to people who are dead or haven't been born yet. He doesn't deliver those anymore. He returns them to sender even when there's no return address. He sends them to the Dead Letter Office where undeliverable mail goes to die. Because some letters aren't meant to arrive. Some messages aren't meant to be read. Some connections across time are dangerous to establish. And some houses are built on ground that shouldn't be built on, by people who meddle with forces they don't understand, creating anchors in time that trap everyone who comes after them. 2847. Spruce Lane is still there, still occupied, still waiting for Christmas morning each year when the temporal displacement activates and all the scattered residents appear simultaneously. The house doesn't look haunted. It looks normal, even inviting, especially during the holidays with its Christmas decorations. But Graham knows better. He knows what the house really is. A trap across time. A place where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. A residence that belongs to everyone who's ever lived there and no one at all. He'll never stop delivering mail there. It's his route, his responsibility. But he'll never open any letter that looks wrong, that has impossible postmarks, that connects recipients across decades. Because some mail should stay lost. Some connections shouldn't be made. And some Christmas mornings should never come.